everyone, and thanks for coming out this evening. I have crib notes because I really like to talk, and I've only got 10 minutes. I can track you. This is going to keep me on track. So I've been riding. I started late. I was 46 when I started riding, and this is my original bike, and I'm still riding it, having toyed with a couple of others along the way. When I had it, I did quite a few road trips, and then in 2018 I thought, I wonder if you get into every province and territory on a street bike. And well, by the time you answer that question and realize it's yes, well, it's max, so you might as well do it. Spent many, many hours on the phone with my sister because my husband did not approve of any of this. He's accepted it now. And I spent a lot of time talking with my sister about doing this journey, all the places I could go to and what I could see. And it became this grand adventure. On February 14th, 2018, my sister was killed in a car accident 3 months before I left. So that was pretty traumatic. And I determined it became not an adventure now, but a compulsion to earn her faith and her trust in me. And my ability to do this grand adventure. And I will confess that when my wheels hit the pavement in Prince Edward Island on the last province of the journey, I cried. I spread ashes as I traveled in every province and territory of Canada. Nunavut, that had originally been taken off the list because you can't get in by road, went back on, and I flew into Nunavut for a few days and had the most amazing experience there. So that was kind of how the trip evolved for me, and there was a lot of, I ran into a lot of people. First of all, you're a woman, you're alone, you can't do this by yourself. What if your bike breaks down? What if a grizzly bear eats you in Dawson City? Right? What if it doesn't? What if none of that stuff happens? What if you go out and have an amazing adventure and be empowered when you come back and full of life and joy and energy? And that's what happened. The other thing that was a underpinning thing for that trip was I was really disgusted with social media and media in general. It's like they really want us to hate each other. And you know what? If you take the politics and religion out of conversations, people are just people. Everywhere you go. They are kind, they are friendly, they are helpful, they are amazing. And I had the greatest experiences with everybody that I met. And I'm sure the others here will tell you the same thing. And by the way, I'm glad to go first because I'm going to look like a big old fraud when these guys get up and compare pictures. So, because I started late, I also need glasses to check my credentials. So, the next thing I was trying to do to keep myself on time was, what questions would people ask me? The first thing everybody asked me is, what was your favorite province? Well, there isn't one really. They all have their little hidden beauty. They all have their secrets. The Yukon's a special place. It just fills you with peace. That was my experience. Antonia, maybe you had the same thing there. It's just right into the Yukon, and it's just like, it's amazing. And the Maritimes was special for me because it was new. I hadn't done it before. I'm not going to tell you a whole bunch of stories because I haven't got time. I've got 10 minutes, man! But they're all on my blog, exploremynation.ca. If you're interested, you can go read stories and look at pictures until you fall asleep. So the other thing is memorable moments. So there's a ton of those everywhere I went. But I got 3 good stories. They're always the ones that get the best reactions. First one was when I was in Newfoundland. Now by the time you get to Newfoundland and your bike's got BC plates, you start to look interesting even if you're not. And this woman comes out of a gas station where I just filled up, and she stops and she looks at my bike and she goes, British Columbia. And I said, yes. You never came all that way yourself. And I said, I did indeed. You didn't. I said, indeed I did come all that way myself. I love you, girl. You've got the nerve. The other story was from the Yukon. There's a couple of guys riding adventure bikes. They've been up, done the Dempster, of course, to Tuck. And they just blew by me on the highway. A little further along, there's a rest stop. I pull in, and here's these two guys. And as soon as I take off my helmet, I hear one guy go, "I told you that was a woman." So they get off their bikes and they come over to talk to me, and we have a conversation about what I'm doing. And the guy says, "Damn," he says, "all they want to do back home is powder their nose and shop." He says, "Up here in Canada, these are women driving the big trucks, and it's the women changing the tires on the trailer, and here's you riding across the whole damn country by yourself." Hey, Canadian women, we rock. My other story is a little less flattering. In Northern Ontario, it's 38 degrees, and if you know Northern Ontario or Ontario at all, it is also humid as heck. Northern Ontario, soon look out, it's 38 degrees and it's humid. So I take off everything under my jacket. And I got a mesh jacket, and the air is flowing through that jacket. I'm like, yes, this is awesome. And then I pull into a gas station, and I do what I do every time. I stop for gas. I get off the bike, and I unzip my jacket. And there's a guy standing right across the pumps. And I'm, oh my God, now it gets better. This is the jacket with the broken zipper. I'm so sorry, sir. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, man. You just made my day. So I'll leave you all with a little bit of advice. I promise this is the last thing I have to say. I think. Better check my crib notes. So, if you're thinking about biking, if you have friends that bike, if you have all kinds of things, don't let people tell you what you can't do. That's on you. Okay? Okay, can't remember. Take all your clothes the same color, then go into one little one mat. Don't ride naked under your gear and forget. Don't insult my bike. I had one where a guy came up to me and he says, "You should be riding a Harley, that's cool." And I looked at him and I said, "I'm a woman on a bike, I'm already cool."
So I've got some great friends on this side of the room. So
So look that way.
Hi, I'm Rowan, and I got into motorcycles a very long time ago, and just start there with that. I was born and brought up in Kuwait, and friends of ours who were neighbors had a motorcycle, Tony, and his motorcycle got stolen one day, and a year later it was discovered and brought returned to him, but it had been painted pink. And I think it was just so they would hide it. Anyway, it was a 750 ZXR, for those of you who know the motorcycles. It's pretty fun, it's a good bike. And so, of course, while my dad was away, he asked myself if I wanted to go for a ride. And Mom was like, "Yeah, sure, you should go for a ride." So had Dad been there, he would have said no for sure. So anyways, went for a ride, and we went out to meet one of his friends, and we had a fantastic time riding. So I was riding on the back, and he, of course, would pin this thing, and like every time we hit a stoplight, we take off again. And in Kuwait, the roads are like exceptional. Like you can fly down any highway, and you're not worried about it. I'd say as good as the Autobahn, but they're not. But still, there's very little traffic, and it's great. So I fell in love with riding then. And then, of course, once we get to his friend's place, like, I'm going to go and chat with my friend. And if you want to ride the bike, you can. I'm 15. I'm like, of course I want to ride the bike. So he's like, just don't crash it. It's already been stolen and painted pink. How much worse could it get? So anyway, I took him for a ride, and honestly, I just fell in love. I'd been riding whatever two-wheelers I could at that point, but taking this bike out, you feel it go through the corners, and then like hitting the gas, and obviously trying to make sure you didn't kill yourself. I just had to have a motorcycle after that. Anyway, came back home in one piece, and my dad wasn't too thrilled. And it was years of me trying to coax my parents into letting me buy a motorcycle. One such incident was actually, I just graduated university out in Langley, and I was driving to get a family portrait done because my family had finally come over to Langley from all over the world to just to get a family portrait done because this is something Mom loved. So we're driving out into the sticks, and I'm like, Mom, it's so safe here. It's totally fine to drive. Like, it's really safe on motorcycles. There's no issues really. Anyway, we're going through one intersection, and this lady needs to get in front of me, so I give her space. As I look in the rearview mirror, there's a guy not paying any attention, chatting with his passenger. And I was like, hold on! And he fully just rear-ended us. As I'm trying to convince my parents that it's really safe here to ride motorcycles. Drop the conversation, pretend to the issue. Anyway, get number plate, numbers and everything taken care of, deal with that. Off to the races from there. Anyway, years later, I'm still working on my dad. Can I please get a motorcycle? Please get a motorcycle. As I finally make it out of, as I make it into grad school, he sends me some money for a birthday gift, and it was like 150 bucks or something. So I'm like, Dad, I can't buy a motorcycle with 150 bucks. And he's like, you can buy it one wheel at a time. I was like, thanks, Dad. You really didn't want me getting on a motorcycle. Anyway, so funny story though, as I'm in the program, there's a friend of mine who's got a connection with somebody else, and he's selling his motorcycle for 150 bucks. So I was like, I'll get that. So my first motorcycle was a CB650 Honda, and of course I needed a helmet now, right? So I had to pay 50 bucks for the helmet. I couldn't believe that helmet was so expensive relative to the motorcycle. This is crazy. But I couldn't get on the bike without a helmet, so that's how I started riding here in Canada with my own motorcycle. Anyway, fast forward down the road, I finally get myself into a position where I can buy myself a motorcycle. And actually, funny story on that too. It wasn't too long after I bought the Harley that I have right now that I was seeing somebody at the time, and her family wasn't happy about the fact that I bought a motorcycle instead of a ring. And so it wasn't too long after that the relationship didn't quite last, but I kept the motorcycle. So anyway, so at that point I was committed to doing big rides. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do like whatever rides I can get my hands on, and this happens to be one of them. So at the time I was in ski patrol, and a friend of mine had been talking about doing a trip down to Baja, California, and doing the dirt roads and everything, the Baja 500 or something. Anyway, various things like this. And so I floated the idea of doing this trip down to Baja, California, because another friend of mine, he was retiring, and it had always been his dream to go down to Baja, California on the motorcycles and come back. So he convinced another friend of ours, and so there were three of us who were going to go down to Mexico. Now, the reason I brought up Kuwait is to lead into the next portion of this. This happened in March of 2020, and so we were going to take a month, rip down to Cabo San Lucas and San Jose del Cabo and spend some time there, and then slowly make our way back in good weather so we didn't have to worry about rain and snow and ice coming back to Canada. And so we would just take our time coming back home. Anyway, we kind of made a beeline right down to San Jose del Cabo, and as we got there, of course, motorcycles as they are, Harleys in particular, always have some kind of mechanical issue. Right? So while mine wasn't the culprit at this point, my friend's motorcycle needed some help. And in Cabo, there's one Harley shop that deals with it. Okay, fine. So we get her bike in, and the bike's repaired, and we get back on the road. The next day, of course, I'm looking at my bike, and I noticed that the front fork, this oil coming out, the fluid coming out, the one fork. I'm like, oh, great. And on my motorcycle, the issue with going down to Cabo, and some of you have actually done this already, is that there's one stretch of highway where it's about 550K without petrol stations. Like you need extra gas. And there may or may not be people at about midpoint in that distance with fuel of various sorts, right? And they would be happy to sell it to you for whatever price you determine. And I was like, I'm not willing to risk putting some garbage in my bike and then getting stranded somewhere. So my bike was then loaded up with a couple of jerry cans of gas, so like a I forget the name of the system, but it's one of those ones you put on the back of your truck and you spin it on and it locks on. So I had 2 of these tied onto the back of my bike because I refused to take panniers on my motorcycle. And so, of course, I've got my bag that I have with my gear, and then I have 1 tank bag. That's all I'm carrying, but that's essentially another person worth of weight on the bike. So I figured all the extra load on the bike and the loads on the roads down there probably caused the front fork to leak, and then of course I'm worried about it now. I'm like, oh, great. So we go to the Harley dealership the next day, and the guy's like, hey, listen, sorry, we can't help you. We don't have the fluid you need for that bike, so we can't do it for you. It's going to take a week to come in. And of course, the pandemic is going on as well, right? So things are starting to shut down in various places. And the thing that started to freak me out was the US was talking about shutting flights down to various countries. And in Kuwait, when the war was happening, we started to see similar things of like different countries stopping flights into different places. So as soon as I see this, my radar goes off and I tell my friends, listen guys, if we're down here on our motorcycles and we need to get back to Vancouver, and the US is shutting flights down, it's not going to be long before they shut the border down to stop people coming into the US. They're going to be very protectionist, so we should probably head back. So, of course, that night we go out and party our faces off. And then the next day we're like, okay, we need to really get this thing going. So we turn around and we make a beeline back for the border. So instead of taking the full month and like slowly getting back, we're like, we need to go back. So we're trying to find places now, Airbnbs that we can find that can make sure that our bikes aren't stolen. And we had several people telling us, listen, if you go down there, the people are going to come at you gunpoint to like take your bikes and like steal your stuff overnight, so make sure they're secure. Don't park over there. If you park in places where you're not supposed to park, they'll rip off your license plates, and then you'll be stranded without a license plate for your motorcycle, and then of course the federales are going to have a nice time. And of course, neither of them spoke any Spanish, and I did a whole semester of Spanish. So I used that to get around. So anytime we had a checkpoint, they'd say, hey, you go up first, chat with them, and they're like, okay, yeah. So on the way back, we're trying to find a new route to get back that's possibly a little quicker, but also ones we haven't seen. So we go through La Paz, we go through a few other places. And finally, we get to a point where my buddy had made friends with somebody trying to communicate with, hey, listen, we need more information on the route, can you help us out? So this guy from Mexico came all the way to Baja. He was from like somewhere in central Mexico. He'd come over to meet us and ride back with us. So he kind of was our escort for a while, all the way up to the border. So because of him, we kind of got through a whole bunch of things that were a little tricky. And then, of course, we said goodbye to him once we moved up to the border, and it was great to have this kind of help. And then we got through the border, and actually, has anyone been to that border? From Mexico to... No, we stayed away from that. So we went to Calexico, like...
Nogales? Mexicali.
Yeah, so Mexicali. So we did Mexicali, and if anybody knows the border there, it's a long, long line of cars waiting to go north. But these little kids are like, hey, you guys are motorcycles, you can go this way. I'm like, what way is that? So he's trying to describe, hey, listen, go this way, yada, yada, yada. And we finally get him and pay him a few bucks, and he's like, okay, come this way. And then basically we end up following him as he's running in front of us because we didn't know where to go. So he's running all the way to the border, and then he takes off, right? We give him a few more bucks. I'm like, oh, thanks, buddy. So we just, 3 of us just rip in, and then we like finally made it across the border. So then we chill out for the night, no problem. And we're getting text messages and everything from people, text messages from people saying, hey, listen, they're not letting people back into Canada, blah. So like, okay, fine, we need to really go. Get up next morning to get going, and then we find out that the US-Mexico border closed that night.
Oh.
So if we hadn't made it that night, our bikes and everything would have been stuck there. And it was just dreadful. Anyway, long story short, we just beeline our way back through snow and ice in summer riding gear. If anybody knows what that's like. But we made it back to Vancouver, and here we are.
Wow, those were 2 tough tales to follow. So I am here, I see I have an entire plan here. The other part of the plan is over there. And yes, future plan as well. I suppose I had so many things I say, and just like Allison, I'm one of those people who, once you push the on button, it's very difficult to turn me off, and I keep going and going and going. So I'll be watching very carefully for the 2-minute signal.
I missed that.
And I think the theme that I kind of decided to land on tonight was the theme of fear and of Mexico, since we just talked about Mexico in the road. And I've spent a lot of time, everyone can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Mommy, turned up the... So, I started writing about, I think 5 or 6 years ago, so not that long. I don't have that much experience on a bike. I've ridden now back and forth through Mexico about 4 times, and up to Tuktoyaktuk, the Arctic Ocean, just this past summer. So that's because my other bike is down in Mexico, and I didn't manage to get down to Ushuaia yet due to pandemic reasons, but I'm sure we'll hear about South America very soon. So, with respect to fear, why did I take up motorcycling? Well, not unlike Rowan, when I was 15, I was visiting Hungary on summer holiday and was spending time with my cousins. And not unlike Rowan, one of my cousins happened to have a dirt bike. Not a pink motorcycle, but a dirt bike. And he's one of those cousins who's just like, jump on! Why don't you just try it? And I was like, well, if you look so enthusiastic, maybe I will. And so I jumped on this dirt bike, and he said, well, there's a handbrake like on a bicycle, but that doesn't work. There's a foot brake, so make sure that if you want to stop, you press the foot brake. And then he says, okay, go. So that was my lesson. It was quite literally a crash course. And what happened was I got on the bike, I hit the throttle, I very quickly saw a fence approaching me, and I didn't know how to turn, and I forgot that the handbrake didn't work, so I was, hitting the handbrake as hard as I could, and nothing was happening, and then I turned the bike in the whatever way I could, and then next thing I knew I was on the ground underneath the bike, and I busted my knee, and I spent the rest of the summer holidays picking apricots in my cousin's backyard. So, I did crash the bike. You didn't, which is good. But that developed in me this fear of fast things and a fear of riding, fear of motorcycles, fear of things on 2 wheels. Many fears that all revolved around motorcycles. And it wasn't until about 5-6 years ago that I was going through some, stuff. And I decided, it's time to face some fears. I need to face some fears because I got a lot of them. So I took up motorcycling because I had this fear of bikes, and I also took up rock climbing because I had a fear of heights. And now I sound like Dr. Seuss. Anyway, so rock climbing was cool, and motorcycling was cool too, and I was getting over my fear, and I was really happy about this. And then I got burnt out at work. And what happens when I get burnt out in one thing is usually I start making these, big claims about the grand things that I'm going to do next. And I have a big mouth. And I said to a bunch of friends and my family, I said, well, you know what I'm going to do? Screw this job. I'm going to ride to Mexico. And this is with less than 1,000 kilometers under my learner's license belt at this point. And so I didn't even know, what type of shoes do I need? What type of pants do I need? What kind of jacket do I need? What do I need to do this trip? So figuring out how to pack the bike was in itself this massive challenge. But I managed. And I got through. I had one family member who's not here say to me, you won't last 3 days. And the cool thing is that reverse psychology works really well on me. So I was like, I'll show you. And so I got down, went all the way through the US. In San Francisco, my wrist really started hurting a lot. And and I got onto this cool Facebook group called Moto Girls of Island City, and it's the most non-judgmental, wonderful group I've ever been a part of on Facebook, and as whoever has been on Facebook knows that Facebook groups can be really ugly and nasty. So I said on this group, hey, you know, like my wrist it's hurting. And someone said, oh, you gotta buy a cramp buster. You know, it's this little piece of plastic, it's $11, and you put it on your throttle, and you're golden. And so I did, and it saved me all the way down for the rest of my trip. My wrist was totally fine. I could lean on the throttle, and I was happy. Now, I was in New Mexico at the border. The border town was Agua Prieta, Douglas, United States. And I was staying in an Airstream that night. I rented this really cool, like, retro Airstream, and they had like, a drive-in movie theater. And anyway, I was pretty happy there, but I had a little bit of anticipation because the next day I was supposed to cross the border to Mexico. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I've been to Mexico before. Why do I feel nervous? You know, I had family members and friends going, don't do it! Don't do it! The north of Mexico is so dangerous. You're gonna get abducted, you're gonna get decapitated, and then after you get decapitated, then you're gonna get kidnapped, and like all of this stuff is gonna happen. And I was like, oh, I was freaking out. I was so afraid that I almost turned back. And then I had this like little thought that came into my head, and I said, you know what, Antonia, just like cross the border 1 centimeter tomorrow. Just like, that's it. Just go 1 centimeter. And then you can go back if you want. If you don't like it and it's horrible and someone's threatening to decapitate you, just go back, right? And so the next day, that's what I did. I went to the border, and then I like crossed over 1 centimeter, and then there was an officer there, and she's just like, why are you stopping? Like, keep going. And I was like, no quieres mi pasaporte? Like, you don't want my passport? She's like, I don't want your passport, you just keep going. And so I was like, well, she told me to keep going, so I'm gonna keep going. And so I kept going. And everything was absolutely fine. And I was very happy. Now, fast forward a little bit. Oh, only 2 minutes? Fast forward a little bit, I'll try to fast forward more. And I don't know, has anyone who's ridden through Mexico or been through Mexico know what a bloqueo is? A bloqueo is like a big roadblock. It's just like a checkpoint, but it's a bit more than a checkpoint because it's not just like random official looking people who may or may not be official who are on the side of the road. It's usually like a giant log or a semi or a bunch of trucks and people with bandanas, maybe for COVID, maybe to look menacing, I don't know. But they block off the road usually in a form of protest. And it's very difficult to get through. And people have machine guns, usually, and they like to point them at people. So somewhere in the bowels of Mexico, in Chiapas, I came across the mother of all bloqueos, like 2 semis across the road, people in a row with these machine guns that were very scary. And I thought, oh, now I'm gonna get kidnapped or decapitated. Like today's my day, this is the day. And then this little motorcycle guy comes over, he's selling bread because there's like a line backed up really, really far. And he's like, "Get us on, you want some bread?" I'm like, "I would love some bread." He's like, "Nice motorcycle." I was like, "Thank you." And then I was like, "How am I gonna get through here?" He's like, "Necesitas apagar tu moto." I'm like, pagar. Pagar means to pay. I'm like, okay, someone wants money. Okay, that's normal. Who do I have to pay? Who do I need to pay to get across this blockade? And he's like, no. Necesitas apagar tu moto. I'm like, he keeps telling me to pay. Is he like the toll troll or something? Like, what's going on here? And finally, he looks at me and he reaches over and I'm like, whoa, okay, I'm getting a little nervous here. All my fears. And he's like, no, apagar. It means to turn off. You need to turn off your motorcycle. I was like, what? Almost done. And so I'm like, okay, so I turn it off. And I'm like, okay, I'm at your mercy. Now what do I need like, okay. I'm like, now he's gonna steal my bike, right? And he's like, no, necesitas empujar. You have to push. So here I was on the highway with my bike off, just rolling, walking with it, and I'm looking at these two semis and all these people with guns, and I'm like, he's like, just walk through. And I'm like, okay, I'm listening. And so I walk, and I continue walking 400, 500 feet. I get past one semi, I get past the other semi. People are eyeballing me, looking at me in a very threatening way. And then I get to the other side of the blockade. And I stopped. I put my kickstand down, and I turned around. And then everyone at once, they roared, they cheered, and they clapped. And we got across the blockade. And I was like, oh, that was it. And here I was thinking that was my last day in Mexico. So, fear doesn't help anyone. My last 4 learnings that I learned on this trip were don't listen to people's opinions or judgments, like Allison said. Oh, there she is. Yeah, don't listen. Just do the thing, right? Take baby steps. Just go 1 centimeter across the border. See how it goes. Trust only in myself and nobody else. And then trust that people are mostly out to do good. Also, as Allison said. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for having me. My name is Adrienne, and I'm going to tell you about a trip that I took 13 years ago. I actually haven't really talked about it in the last 10. So this is the first time I'm talking about it publicly, and I want to thank you very much for making this space available. So in 2010 to 2011, I spent 8 months traveling through South America by myself, unsupported. I rode a Suzuki DR 650, 33,000 kilometers from Bogota, Colombia, up to Cartagena, and then all the way down to Ushuaia, that we've heard about. A very famous place on the adventure motorcycle riding route, and yes, I've got the picture. I then rode all the way back up to Buenos Aires and finished my route trip there. I did it without a cell phone, I did it without a GPS. I had a map, and I had a whistle. Because I always figured if shit went sideways, who was I going to call? What I needed was a whistle to be able to find someone to come in, or so someone could find me. So before I left, like everybody else you've heard, everybody told me not to go. I was going to die, I was going to be decapitated, it was crazy. But my mom and my dad said, of course you should go. So I was going to do the whole thing, all the way everybody does the whole big thing, and then my dad said, well, that's silly. Nobody wants to drive through the States, and you can do Mexico some other day. So why don't you just go straight on down and spend all your money and all your time and start in Colombia? What could happen in Colombia? The park had just been taken off the terrorist list, so it was pretty much safe. I went through all sorts of blockades, and I don't know how I decided that the dangerous guys were the ones wearing rubber boots. Everybody else would be fine. I had a great time in Colombia. It was a spectacular country. Then I went into Ecuador. It was amazing, spectacular, wonderful. Everything was great. There was an attempted coup. The gas was cut off. The bank machines are cut off. You just keep going. You just keep riding. You meet amazing people along the way. The bike was fabulous. At one point, I realized I was on this very uncomfortable bike. I did no upgrades that everybody on the big blogs tell you have to do, and all of the BMW 1250 riders tell you you must have this and you must have that, and you gotta have this, and you gotta have panniers, and you gotta have blah, blah, blah. I had a suitcase on the back, held on with bungees, and at the time, I was basically one of the first Canadian women to do it, and I still remain in a very small group of people who have done it. Anyways, then I got into Peru. Peru is spectacular, and I decided at that point I needed to get off the highway altogether, and I did the rest of the trip off-road. I went into the highest, most remote mountain passes that I could find. I was alone most of the time. I would go into itty-bitty, teeny-tiny little towns, and people would invite me in to eat or to sleep on their backyard. I camped. I was not decapitated. I was not taken captive. People opened me into their homes. Then I got into Bolivia, and I bought shitty gas. And everything started to go crappy after that. My bike seized up, and I started to have serious mechanical problems. I mean, I had problems, like I had flats, and I knew how to change a flat. One thing that everyone else in this room is going to tell you, that if you get a flat tire, and you're on a remote mountain road and nobody's there to help you, someone's there 20 minutes later. Like, there are always people around. You're going to get a flat, you start changing your flat, and 20 minutes later a truck's going to come along and say, what are you doing? I've got a pump and I've got a blah, 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 and they'll help you fix your tire. People will always stop for a traveler in distress. And I've had people tell me that the only reason people stopped was because I'm a woman, and that's not true. I was a solo traveler. And people will stop for solo travelers, especially if you are in trouble. They will stop. So I got into Bolivia, and I got into trouble because I used shitty gas. And after that, I struggled with that bike, and there's a lot of riders in this room. One of my favorite places in the world is when I put on my motorcycle helmet, and it's quiet in there, and you get on, you put your leg over your bike, and you turn on your bike, and think for a second about that roar of your bike, that hum of your bike, or that purr of your bike. Well, when your bike dies, and you are in the middle of nowhere, and that purr stops, it is the heaviest quiet you will ever hear. It lands on you, and you know you are nowhere from a mechanic, and you don't know how far behind you till help will arrive. It could be an hour, it could be a day, it could be 3 days, it could be a week, and in those circumstances you just start pushing your bike, and you just keep pushing, and pushing, and pushing. And if you're on the Salar de Uyuni, the largest salt flat in the world, you push for many days until you can find help and they get you to the next mechanic 25 kilometers away. So I thought once I got out of Bolivia, I got into Argentina, and I thought everything would be great in Argentina, and it was not great. And the bike died again, and I coasted down a hill that must have been as big as the Coca-Cola, and I coasted all the way down to a shitty little, dusty little town in northern Argentina, and I knew I couldn't push my bike anymore. And I sat down on the side of the sidewalk, and I had this 400-pound motorcycle and just me, and I sat there eating chocolate biscuits, thinking the trip's over, like I can't push it anymore. And as the tears came down my face, on my street, filthy face, around the corner walked Skip and Rachel from Australia. And they said, oh hi, my name's Rachel and this is my husband Skip. Did you know he's a motorcycle mechanic? So Skip and Rachel hung out with me for the next 3 days. I got very drunk with Rachel and Skip fixed my motorcycle. But it wasn't quite fixed, so 3 days later they handed me off to these three other guys who were riding Royal Enfields through South America following Che Guevara's route. They adopted me, and they had a little film crew, so I ended up being part of a Che Guevara movie hosted by Royal Enfield Argentina. So the Royal Enfield Argentinian mechanics continued to fix my bike. And by the time they were all done with me, I was back on the road. I then went all the way down through Chile and Argentina, Chile and Argentina, Chile and Argentina, Chile and Argentina, all the way down to the bottom when I finished. So I faced adversity like everybody else is going to tell you. I met amazing people like everybody else has told you. When people tell you they've got a dream, don't tell them not to go, tell them to go. But like every story I was told by Mel, every story has got a start, a beginning, and an end. You got to face some adversity, and usually there's a little subplot, right? And yes, on this trip, I fell in love. When I was way up in the top of some remote mountain trip road in Peru, I was driving along, and I was thinking in my lovely little helmet, this is before the bike was ruined, boy, you are crazy. But you're not as crazy as that guy on that bicycle who's doing this same road, but on a bicycle. So I stopped and I pulled up my helmet that had the Canadian flag on the back and I said, "My name's Adrian, I'm from Canada, who are you?" And I met a guy named Simon who was doing the whole trip on a bicycle. We ended up courting each other for the next 6 months and we fell in love and we got married. That love story did not last. But I am thrilled that tonight, my son, who came from that meeting, is here tonight hearing this story for the first time that I've ever spoken about it publicly. So Bryn, thank you for being here. Me find my voice to tell this story again. Thank you. And thank you for making this a venue that's open to us. Thank you. Wow.
So yeah, my name's Andrew. I've been riding bikes since I was a teenager. If you ask my parents, they'll say that one of the first sentences I ever strung together was, "When can I get a motorcycle?" And that was very much the influence of my uncles at the time. I had a few uncles that rode, so I got very much sucked into the idea. And then as soon as I could get one myself, much to my parents' chagrin, I did. So I had been riding, I think by the time I was in my 20s, I thought that I had seen a lot. I thought that I was a very experienced rider. I thought I was very good at it. I had been in accidents before and I had mitigated some damage. I walked away from all of them. I thought that I was in the category of people that could manage themselves on a motorcycle. And what I came to learn was that most of what will really lay you up is outside of your control. And I recall that I was, a lot of people here talk about really distant, far off motorcycle trips too. I was thinking I could spin some yarns about some trips that I've been on. Really, what happened to me was very close to home. And again, that was part of my confidence as I had been out and I had been wandering. But this was within blocks of home. And I remember I was on my way to university one morning, and I was heading along the road, and there was a Buick coming the other direction, and I mean, I saw him, he was looking my direction, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I thought this guy seemed to pass each other with 2 cars on the road, and then sort of last second, he decided to make a left turn right in front of me. So I remember I had about enough time in my head to lock up my brakes and think, oh shit. And then I collided with his bumper, and I briefly remember sort of flying through the air, and I ended up under a truck, my bike ended up under another car. I wasn't walking for like 8 or 9 months after that. And I remember when I sort of realized what was going on and I was lying on the ground, my first thoughts were, oh, the stereo's still playing on my bike. I was like, this is an inappropriate time for music. So I dragged myself across the pavement and I turned my stereo off. And next thought was, is this going to be totaled? Yeah, it looks at, okay, it's going to be totaled. Next thought was, I had just 2 days prior finished a tattoo on my leg, and a friend of mine was in an accident maybe 6 months prior. Same exact accident, but he didn't have engine guards where I did on the bike that I was riding. He lost his leg just above the knee. So I looked down, and my jeans were tattered and covered in blood, and I sort of grabbed them and ripped them open a bit more, and I was like, okay, it didn't hit the tattoo, so as long as I keep the leg, we're all right, we're in good shape. But I was laid up for a bit, and I was thinking, for a moment, you know, should I ever ride a motorcycle again? Will I be able to run and jump again? You know, like is walking my peak for the rest of my life? And before the ambulance arrived, I was already thinking, okay, I'm going to get maybe $7 or $8 grand out of insurance on this. I could probably buy it. So I was thinking, okay, I can't ride for a while, but what I can do is I can turn a wrench. So I started looking for projects, and I remember I found in North Dakota, I found a Commando 850 frame, Norton Commando 850, and then in Minneapolis, there was an old Ironhead that was remarkably cheap and seemed to be in good shape. So we made a bit of a road trip to go get that. And I was trying to recruit somebody to come down and help me. I was like, I'm going to need to load a bike, I'm on crutches, you know, I can't really do very much by myself. So somebody needs to come down and help me. I was like, who has a week that they can take off? So this guy that I had met just through riding with some friends of mine the summer prior, he was like, yeah, I'm available. I was like, okay, so I went and I picked him up. And I said, okay, so I'm really trying to make a quick trip out of this. I want to get across the border, no hassles, no issues. I've gone through my truck with a fine-tooth comb. I know that I'm not going to be slowing us down at all. Please stay the same, you know? I don't want any issues. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm fine, figure everything out. A couple of kilometers away from the border, he says to me, oh, I do have this outstanding assault charge. It's bullshit, though. And it won't come up. It won't come up. And I'm thinking to myself, it's going to come up. So we get to the border, and sure enough, it comes up. And we're getting the multiple hour treatment, and they're peeling through my truck, and they're doing everything. And they come in to talk to me for maybe the 5th or 6th time. And I remember he came in, he'd already talked to me so many times before. The border guard comes in and he says, all right, you empty your pockets on the table, that includes all the dope you got in there. And I was like, I'm not insane. I didn't walk up to a border with drugs in my pocket, you know, like, what are you asking me? And he said, oh, that's what your friend thought too. Oh. I said, what does that mean? And he pulled out a little baggie and dangled it in front of me. So we got the full treatment there. I was there for the rest of the night. I got hassled every time I crossed the border for the next 10 years. But they did end up letting us through. And I remember we went down and we got the bike. And I remember when I went to test drive it, the guy wheeled the bike out and I sort of hobbled over to it. And I set my crutches up against the truck and then I climbed onto it and went for a little rip and we came back. We got it back. But it's sort of what propelled me into, I guess, more customization and more fabrication, just working on my bikes myself. It started sort of years before that, just I had a couple of bad experiences with mechanics and I figured I need to do all my work myself so that I can retrace my own steps. If something's missing, it's going to be in my shop. If I did something wrong, I can figure out what I did. I can work my way backward. But this was where I was like, okay, I'm not going to be riding for a while. But I can teach myself stuff in this period of time, and that's sort of what got me into builds and into fabrications. So I think I didn't think that the story was much about fear, but you know, now that I've heard so many people talking about it tonight, to be honest, I think that there's a certain amount of fear that's healthy, especially with motorcycling specifically. I think that that if you climb onto a motorcycle and you go riding out somewhere and you're not a little bit terrified for your life, you're doing something wrong, because it's a very present danger, and I think that I certainly feel lucky to have walked away from some of the experiences that I've had, and I think that much like I've heard from a couple of people tonight. You go on some of the long trips and then suddenly you feel a little bit more comfortable sticking close to home. I don't mind that either. But I think that facing that danger and that fear is certainly healthy. I think that you can get a lot of rewards out of the experience of sort of chasing those adventures. I certainly have met a lot of people along the way that have changed my life. I've had experiences that I think that have had a lasting impression on me. And if you're afraid to go out there and do that, then you're not going to have any of those. And I think that certainly I believe that if everybody liked the same things, the world would be a boring place. So especially after spending some time in Japan. I saw the customization culture there is crazy for motorcycles. Everybody, if you saw a fully stocked bike, it would be an anomaly. Because people put so much work into these fine little personal customizations, and it's incredible to see. And it really made me think that when I see people that put their personality into their motorcycles, you can see it, you can hear it, it stands out. You look at it and you're like, okay, I almost know more about you because of what you've just shown up on, you know? And that's, I think, a culture and a perspective that I might not have gained if I wasn't sitting on the butt for a whole bunch of months. So sort of beginning, middle, and end, I guess this is a story of triumph over terrible circumstances and sort of learning more about yourself in the process, and also becoming more engaged with the motorcycle community and sort of seeing, maybe like gleaning more from the effort that people put into personal touches. And I think that that's one of my favorite things about the moto community, is just seeing weird stuff that people come up with. And it's like, that might not have been functional or practical, but it's you, and it's cool that you did it, and I'm excited to see it. So I guess thanks for having me out. I appreciate the space. There's some really interesting stuff across the hall here that's been cool to have a peek at, but mostly, I'm just happy to see that people are excited about moto culture. Oh, I should also say, I got connected here because I help put on the Moto Social in Vancouver here. So yeah, we do that once a month. We've got one less for the season here. It's coming up. It's the last Tuesday of every month. We're still waiting to announce the location. We do it 2 weeks out. But yeah, everybody that rides a motorcycle, even if you don't ride motorcycles, bike or no bike, come out. Everybody's welcome. It's a good time. Very much just meant to connect people with similar interests. A place where you can let your guard down, nobody feels intimidated, and you can just sort of relate to people over your mutual appreciation of motorcycles. So it's nice meeting everybody here tonight, and I appreciate the opportunity to have a little chat with you guys. And yeah, have a good night.